Dawn, thanks for joining me on short notice. Today is your son's birthday?
It is. My son William turns 21 years old today. It's very bittersweet. I had a divorce a couple years ago. So for goodness, I think the first time in my son's entire life I'm not actually going to see him today and it's driving me insane. But yes, my baby boy is 21 years old and I think I'm going to need a few shots later on tonight. Parenting a parenting a kiddo with autism was not easy. Is not easy.
I I don't know. I haven't been there. I have a few ideas from what I've read. I know that you got to be just a super proud mama today.
That young man has overcome so much. You know, we were it's an actual it's really kind of an interesting story when Will got diagnosed. So my ex-husband played in the NFL and we were actually living in Buffalo and had been goodness, we moved there in 2003 and Will was born in 2004. So I was a stay-at-home mom with him. And I was the one taking him to gymboree classes, and I remember at one point in time going, "Huh, he keeps going up and down the same slide for an hour in class." And then when it's time for circle time with the other kids, he just wanted to keep going up the same slide. So in my logical mind, I'm a lawyer by training. I'm like, Something's off. I don't know what. Let's just keep an eye on it." And then you'd notice other little things. We took him to see Dora the Explorer, and every time someone clapped, he would scream bloody murder. Like, this is weird. So at his 12-month appointment, I told his pediatrician that I thought he needed to be evaluated. And she said, "For what?" And I'm like, "For autism." She's like, "There ain't no way." I'm like, "No, I actually think I think this must have been at his 18-month appointment because by 19 months he had been evaluated and was already in occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. And at the age of 3, his diagnosis was confirmed. But a lot of that had to do with me being at home with him day in and day out. I recognized regression when it happened. And then, of course, Holly Robinson Pete and NFL quarterback Rodney Pete are good friends. I actually started working for the Petes when Holly was pregnant with her son RJ. So when I started having some suspicions, she was one of the first people I called. And yeah, by 3, my sweet, amazing, brilliant young man was diagnosed with autism. He was diagnosed on the spectrum.
How did that feel to you when you actually found out that there was a diagnosis for your child?
I've come to find that a diagnosis isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm beginning to change my mind a little bit about this in the current climate. And I can explain about that a little bit more. But back in the day, especially like my generation of kids, I'd say between 20, 25, 30, where we were still sort of in limbo, right? Like the numbers weren't so high as to garner all the attention. So the moms and dads we were in the trenches and getting an actual diagnosis meant getting services for your kiddos. So it's something I often shared with parents as they were going through what can be a very scary diagnosis. In this situation, a diagnosis means services. It means a free and appropriate public education through your school district. And I wish I could say I am set that those things won't change, but I think our families are in for a very, very big fight along these lines. It's hard for
What
me to really put a word on it because I don't want it to get political, but a lot of it is political. There is very much
can
so a
you
lot political.
can you explain to me what you mean when you say you're afraid the families are in for a hard fight?
Yes, 100%. So I'm just gonna keep it real. You know me, as long as you've known me, I wear everything on my sleeve. I don't, mince words. I will just
What I
keep it
like
real.
about you.
Hey, either love me or hate me for it. But if someone's kiddo was gonna get autism, I'm glad it was Will because he had a mom who was gonna fight for him. And one of the things I did was just learn as much as I can. And that meant everything from learning about vaccines and any sort of effect they may have had on my son. I will be completely honest with you. I am in the category that believes that my son had a reaction to the MMR vaccine. he broke out in head to toe hives in some sort of rash that we've not been able to replicate or has never duplicated itself. Right after he got that shot, we noticed some regression, less interaction, less FaceTime, and it was pretty clear to me, even to the point where when we moved from Buffalo down to the Texas area and finally came across his old baby videos, I'm like, "What did I miss? What did I miss?" Because I remember a happy, engaged, met all of his milestones kid, and sure enough, the videos confirmed all of that. But what I did do was become extremely educated on vaccines. I withheld some vaccines from my son. I just had this thing. I didn't want my kid to get more than one vaccination at each doctor's visit.
And I just kinda wanna insert here, you and I talked previously, and I might be wrong, correct me if I am. I get the impression you're not, like, anti-vax.
Nope, I'm absolutely pro vaccine, 100% pro vaccination, 100%. I
That
do
might be
believe
hard for some people to understand given what you just said about your child's reaction.
100% because there are other like okay, so if autism was what we had to deal with, right? We had the case here in Texas recently where the people who were anti-vax lost their kid to measles, a completely preventable disease. And when they were asked again, knowing what they know now, if they do the same thing, they would not have vaccinated their child. And I'm sorry, if I have to choose between autism and my child not being here, there's no question for me. And I want to be very clear about this, Jane. I am unapologetically on the left. Anyone who knows me knows that. Autism is not a left or right issue. It is an issue about access to services and access to care. And one of the first things we saw in this administration was immediately limiting access to services and care, be that through the Department of Education, which makes sure our kiddos have access to that free and appropriate public education, cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. I have friends that I'm well connected with who are losing their access to in-home healthcare providers. Schools are already starting to segregate kids out of that least restrictive environment and are putting them back in segregated schools. It is political. We didn't see these rollbacks under any other administration. So the rhetoric has been really bad. And I'll be honest with you, I followed junior for years because when I was looking for answers about my son, I heard him speak at different conferences. One in particular was called Autism One. It seemed to make sense to me. If we as humans have an intolerance to mercury, why should there be mercury in vaccines? It just didn't make sense to me. So I just asked questions. I read the studies. I looked for peer review articles, stuff of that nature. So to this day, neither Will didn't get his second MMR shot, although he's got immunity for measles. We had to do a titter test on him last year, and after one shot, he does have immunity. And then my daughter was only vaccinated on a schedule where she got one a visit. My doctor even said he thought it amounted to cruel and unusual punishment that I would bring her back once a month for a shot, and she has not had the MMR shot. We have signed the MMR exemption here in Texas. This kiddo will be 18 in less than a year. We've talked about it. When she's ready to go get the vaccine, she has my support. But it's going to be a decision for her to make when she gets ready for school. So all that to say, 20 years ago, I soaked up everything RFK Jr. had to say like a sponge. I needed as much information as possible, but over the years, I've noticed his stance becoming more and more extreme, if you will. For me, what started as an attack on autism families within this administration was everything we're all pretty familiar with at this point in time. And it was RFK Jr.'s comments a couple months ago about everything kiddos with autism won't be able to do, how it absolutely destroys family. They won't be able to play baseball. My son does. He'll never play the piano. My son did. They'll never go to homecoming. My son did. He'll never have a job. He's held a job every year since he's left high school. So it's all this limiting information given to us by the person who is supposed to be in control of the services that our kiddos get. When so many of us, I really think about Holly Robinson Pete and Rodney just trailblazing on this issue, giving us hope, because some days hope was what we need. It's all we had to keep us fighting for our kids. And one of the things that RFK Jr.'s comments did several months ago, which really pissed me off, because it's not something I had seen since very early on in our autism fight, he created a chasm in between the autism community. You had those of us whose kiddos are moderately or mildly affected, such as mine. My son will still need lifelong care. Will never be able to live on his own. He will always have to have some sort of assistance. But apparently, because my son wasn't severely autistic, then I didn't necessarily have a say. And I had a young woman tell me that her son at 6 was still in diapers. And I was like, okay, cool. Cause mine was in diapers until he was 9, like literally cleaning 9-year-old poopy butt. So what's your
Mhm.
point? I don't go out there and advocate for those who are mildly and moderately affected. I advocate for the worst of the worst because that means if your kiddos get services, mine do too. And one of the things I tried to address with so many autism parents at the time who really honestly felt seen for the first time, and I want to acknowledge that a lot of people in this community don't feel seen. It is extremely isolating. You don't go out much because people don't understand autism. It is, Jane, it's extremely, extremely isolating. So a lot of those families, especially of very disabled autistic children, felt seen. But all I could say to them is, I get that. However, look at what is happening with the Department of Education. They're the ones responsible for making sure that your kiddos get transportation to school, that your kiddo gets school. And we're pushing all of that back. Oh, no, we're just going to leave that up to the states. Then I go, you do know that's why they had to come up with the Department of Education in the first place, right? Because states weren't doing what they needed to do. So they're already starting to roll back protections under the IDEA with regards to our kids. We see what's happening with Medicaid, Medicare, access to Social Security, and a host of other things. The comments that came out today about Tylenol. I'll put it to you like this, Jane. So, for those who may not be aware, Trump, with his full chest, got online and they have now, which, RFK Jr. said in September, we will have an answer about what causes autism. Well, it's September and they apparently have a reason for autism. And apparently it's Tylenol. And it's now putting the onus back on moms. That just the tone of this particular news press conference. Well, you moms just need to put up with a little more pain and not take Tylenol. So now the onus is on moms to suffer. And there's some really bad misinformation going on around about Tylenol that is just not true, and you see everyone in the medical community just absolutely freaking out about this. I look at it, I looked at there apparently is a drug they're going to be introducing that allegedly provides some relief for families. All right, I looked up the cost. How much is it gonna cost families? $100 a month, and that's without Medicaid. If they're cutting Medicaid, who's gonna be able to access that prescription at $100 a month? So I have issues. I have a lot of issues, and I'll put it to you like this: I have a group of very strong autism moms who are sort of my circle. They're tired. They're tired. They're tired of fighting. This one today made everyone sort of stop and you just felt the air being released from your body. So much fighting, so much advocacy work on behalf of these kids. We want to find the cure. We want to find the cure. We want to keeping this from happening from families. How do you do that if you're blaming something like Tylenol? I mean, they've had plenty of time to study it. They haven't shown any particular link that would say definitively that it causes autism. I always say, just like with vaccines, right? We all got vaccinated. So if vaccines in and of themselves caused autism, we would all have it. We've all taken Tylenol, or let me pronounce it for, the president, acetaminophen. We've all taken it. If it caused autism, we would all have autism, and we don't. So I think a lot of us are just tired because A, we want to see resources put towards the actual cause of autism, and B, getting families relief who have to deal with it. And I fear that that is going to be chipped away at. And we just don't even know how to start this next fight, Jane. Like, how do you fight the misinformation? How do you fight it? Look, I know enough about manipulation and everything else after you divorce a narcissist. This gaslighting been such a big trigger because I just sit there like, y'all do see, you guys do understand that's not true, right? How are people not seeing this isn't true? And it's mind boggling.
Well, I called you because as a mom, when I heard the statement that this is factual, it's an unproved theory. That's
Correct.
all it is an unproved theory. When
Correct.
I heard that said that a pregnant woman taking Tylenol, acetaminophen, when she's pregnant, this is the cause of autism. When I heard that statement as a mom, knowing that any mom would die if they felt they had done anything to harm their child, it just put a stake through my heart for all because the first thing I thought of was all the moms out there with autistic children, the guilt that that would lay on them.
There's so much guilt from the beginning. What could I have done differently? What didn't I do? Should I have not gotten, every time he had an ear infection, like literally treating an ear infection with antibiotics, and he was due for one of his vaccinations, and I didn't question it, right? There is enough mom guilt for to go around for a lifetime without it having imposed on you a little bit more. I will tell you this, I have an amazing BS meter, and so when people give these off the cuff, unproven theories, I'm like, "All right, let's go with your theory." I was married to a professional football player. I conceived at the time he was still playing. That means that man was on Toradol, acetaminophen, he was on all the bad, like, he was on the good drugs back then, okay? So I would have conceived my son while he was actively treating football injuries. So whose fault is it? Like, are we sure it's not any of these other things that he might have been taking when we got pregnant?
It's a great point.
Has anyone studied that yet? Of course they haven't. But now you've got all these people out here believing that if they take Tylenol or they give their children Tylenol, that's like the one thing that really helps when they're teething and everything. Look, and they're already trying to get rid of mental health aids. If there's anything that parents of kiddos on the spectrum need, it's mental health care help. So we're cutting access to that health care, making it harder, more difficult for people to access mental health care with professionals, medication to treat said mental health issues. There is a statistic, Jane, that 80% of our families get divorced because it's just too much. I call BS. Let's stop with all of this. Let's get to the real issue. I think pretty much across the board, what I've seen in the medical community is they acknowledge there's some sort of genetic component to autism. That's pretty clear. I mean, and if anyone wants to try and argue against that, good luck. Now, what's the trigger, right? Something is triggering it. Something has triggered it to the point that like 1 in 30, some 30 kids is being diagnosed. That's too many. It's too many. And we need to know what's actually causing it. But I bet you, Jane, a lot of your viewers don't know the ins and outs of something called the vaccine court that Are you familiar with the vaccine court, Jane?
No, I'm not,
Yeah, exactly. So,
and
and
I'm
it
pretty well read.
so the lawyer in me hears stuff like this, and I'm going, I wonder if the company that owns Tylenol is gonna do anything about this. There's some pretty strong executive protections when it comes to suing. Let me tell you, one of the most protected groups in this country is makers. Vaccine manufacturers are so protected in this country. You cannot go out and sue a vaccine manufacturer. You got the COVID vaccination. You went blind. They know you went blind because of the COVID vaccination. You actually have to sue in a special master's court, which is located in Washington, D.C. Same goes for any other vaccine injury. They literally, it's a special master's court. They call it the vaccine court. It is in DC, where you basically file a claim in the event you are vaccine injured. So every single time a vaccination is given, the vaccine maker puts 25 cents in this fund. So if someone makes a claim and is paid out of this fund, that's where the money comes from, but you cannot sue. Well, you won't successfully sue the manufacturer based upon the law that gives them this immunity.
Did not know that.
But what's
Did
the
not know that.
problem? It's a 5 to 10 year process to get through. Think a quarter of the claims that are actually filed receive any sort of compensation whatsoever. So now that you're putting us all on notice that Tylenol is the new cause, do we all file a class action lawsuit against Tylenol? Because last I checked, I don't know if Tylenol has any sort of immunity in this sense of the word. I don't know if somebody thought that out.
I want to touch on something you mentioned about the number of cases.
Hmm.
I've been interested in this subject, and I read an article that I believe was written by one of the people who compiled the original database on autism
Hmm.
back in the 80s, maybe. And he was explaining that part of the explosion in cases is that at that time, it was a very narrow definition of autism, which I believe in the early 2000s, you're going to know this better than me,
Hmm.
then was broadened
Yes.
to include Asperger's, and
Yes.
then has been broadened since to
Yes.
include any things that resemble Asperger's. So I'm not saying there is not more autism now than there was, but at the same time, that needs to be taken into consideration, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So I think there are a couple things going on. I think we're absolutely seeing an increase in the number of people with autism. I don't think you can deny that whatsoever. I mean, I I know a bunch of friends, we refer to ourselves as neurospicy be- because we all have some of those little traits. I think what we also saw was better diagnoses. The criteria got better to diagnose people. A lot of people don't realize that with the passage of the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Act, disability, you know what I mean, and education, yes. So it's the Education Act, which makes sure these kiddos have a free and appropriate public education. The school districts have an affirmative duty to find students who may have special needs within the community. It is an affirmative duty. They have to pass out flyers. If they've got a child that they know hasn't been to school, they have an affirmative duty to go into that home to make sure that child doesn't need additional care or help with any sort of disabilities. So, Child Find is what it's called, was extremely helpful in helping identify some of those cases. Jane, there's a huge racial disparity in when kiddos get diagnosed. Young African American and Latino, Hispanic boys are usually a year to 2 years likely to be diagnosed later than white kids. So there's a socioeconomic aspect to it. And listen, let's just be completely honest. And this is my I am not an expert. This is just my research over the years. I'm 49, so I'll be 50 next year. And my generation took 13 shots. That's the reality. Today's kiddos, at least when my kids were going through all of this, I'm so glad they're a little older now and won't necessarily have to deal with it. But last I checked, when my kids were having issues with it, it was 69. 69. And so There's gotta be some sort of correlation, or there's some kiddos whose bodies just can't get rid of those toxic, materials that might be in vaccinations. Maybe. Let's research that. Let's
Right.
research that. But you don't get on air and definitively claim something like Tylenol is the cause of autism, and then you put the blame on moms. Like, when I say to you this morning, the moms I know who you will usually see out and about fighting this, we're tired. For so long, the misinformation, battling over and over. This one, I've never seen this group of women, definitely not defeated. Defeated is not the word for it. They're tired. They have dedicated themselves. A lot of the kiddos are in their 20s, and so they've dedicated the last 20 years to, excuse me, making sure our families have access. And this, as we try and support parents going through this journey, it just took the wind right out of me. I don't know how else to say it. When they made the comments earlier this year, I got pissed. I was not happy. This took the air out of me. This one was like, so now it's the mom's fault. Now it's because they already undertreat women's pain anyways. Yeah, when they go ahead and start looking at what the male partner was imbibing that may have caused autism, then maybe we can talk about that. But putting it on the mom because she had a headache, and you, of course, know you've got a son. When we get fevers while we're pregnant, they can be dangerous, right? If we don't find ways to bring those fevers down that are safe for our kids, they can be dangerous. Imagine now there's some young pregnant mom out there going, I feel like I'm getting a migraine. I'm not gonna take this medication because what if, just what if? And it ends up making their baby sick. Like,
It's being a mother is a responsibility like no other responsibility on
yes.
earth. It's a responsibility like no other. Before we wrap up, I just have a couple of questions. One is, what would you have a great support system. What would you say to moms out there who, as I said, my fear when I heard this was the poor mom who now says, "Oh my gosh, this was my fault."
Yeah.
What would you say to those moms? And then what would you say to all of us in general that we may not know about autism that we should know?
Sure. The first part is tap into reputable community organizations who know what they're doing. Listen, one of my favorite organizations in this country is called Culture City. It starts with a K, Culture City. If you go to a museum, an airport, a concert, there's likely a quiet room in that arena or facility. Culture City is responsible for putting those there. They're big on inclusion and getting information out about wandering, real threats to our families, right? Stay connected with local organizations that are grounded in medicine and science and not politics. You can go on Facebook, TikTok, any of the social medias and find political groups that are gonna be aligned with how you want to treat this, but I would strongly recommend people dealing with this right now stay connected to the American Academy of Pediatrics, talk to their pediatricians who are so knowledgeable about this, find good supportive communities because there are going to be out there who will feed some out there that will feed you absolute crap because they know people aren't going to do their own due diligence. So find your community. Don't just look for people who are going to like agree with everything you say. You want to be in a group of individuals who are going to challenge you and add support. Like, you did not cause this. If you find yourself in any sort of chat or support room where someone is telling you that your child's autism is your fault, run immediately. Immediately. And then what would I like other families to know? I don't mean to get a little emotional about this, but it is so true for our families in particular. It really does take a village. My God, I didn't expect to get emotional about this. I don't want to say lucky, but when Will was going through the process of being diagnosed, we were still in Buffalo. My ex was still playing for the Bills. When you're in that situation, you have a lot of access. The best doctors, I didn't have to wait months to get appointments. So, from that perspective, that village was extremely helpful. But getting connected in with people who aren't in the autism space. We don't want, like, autism is already our lives 24/7. My life will never not have autism associated with it. So be the friend that's like, we're going to get drinks or we're going to go dancing. Or do you want, I noticed you haven't been on vacation in a while. Do you think you'd want to go on a girls' trip? I think that that would be the message I would let people know if they want to help families dealing with autism right now. Things are going to get tougher financially as services continue to be cut. Parents' availability because their kids aren't getting after school care, busing, wherever those budget cuts hit autism families, be there, offer support because it really does feel alone and isolating at times. Again, there's a reason the divorce rate is so high, but I can't reiterate this enough. You did not cause your kids autism. We don't know what causes autism. We do not know what causes autism. I cannot say that enough. If that were the case, no other children would be born with autism. Women, take care of yourselves. You have a headache during pregnancy, so long as your doctor advises it, you go on ahead and take that Tylenol or anything else you need to feel better. Because if you're not still here, who's going to take care of said baby with autism once it's born? So I know I've rambled a lot, but I'm so passionate about this. This is my life. It's very surreal having other people having conversations about a life they don't know about. And it seems so simple. Tylenol does not cause autism. Tylenol does not cause autism. Mothers are not responsible for their child's autism. And if you find yourself in a group of people who try and tell you otherwise, find a new group of people.
Dawn, thank you so much for
Thank you, Jane.
taking your time today. And what a coincidence that we're talking today, and it is your son's
Yes,
birthday.
I'm so
Happy
proud.
birthday.
He is just amazing. Thank you, and I thank you for using your platform to spread this such an important message with everything that's going to go on with this. I mean, funding for research, who knows? Like, we just don't know what's going to happen, and I think that's where some of the pause comes from. We're already tired from fighting. What are we going to have to fight next? So, as long as we have allies like you who get it, you don't have to have a kid with autism. You're a mom. You're a mom. And I know when we spoke earlier, that's what really got you. At the end of the day, I'm a mom, and I will continue to fight for my kid. So, yeah, it's almost like bring it on, but oof, we're tired. We're
Thank you,
tired.
Dawn. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jane. I appreciate you, okay?